Now, if we are to believe reports, the decades-long civil war will soon come to an end. What, in your opinion, are the challenges of a post-conflict recovery? How to bring people to think in unity of a united country now that the war is over?
I think the challenges after the warfare has ended are still considerable, especially in a context where you've had chronic conflict. I think it's useful to think about a continuum of violence. Warfare may end, but you've still got a lot of small arms circulating. You've still got ways of doing things that have evolved in conflict zones that are very difficult, over decades, that are very difficult to shift. So there's a possibility that you're going to have issues like armed criminality becoming more of a problem, or violence maybe for women remaining within the domestic sphere, or in rural communities, still being a problem. So I think there's still a lot of issues to work through. The other effects of conflict, apart from the violence, just people having to rebuild lives and livelihoods and regain trust in fellow villagers or neighboring villages that may have sided with the other side or may not have come to your aid at a time of need, are also going to be quite considerable. It requires, I think, interventions at a number of levels. Obviously, the messages that political leaders provide, the example that they set, the services that they endorse, provide at a symbolic level, something very important that people can latch on to in forging a sense of hope for the future.
And do you think you'll be involved in this rehabilitation and recovery programs?
I hope so. I think everyone has a role to play here. I mean, whether you're in it professionally or whether you're there just as a citizen, I think there's a burden of responsibility to examine what the effects of conflict have been on your community, on your village, or even on yourself, in terms of the way in which you think, the way in which you deal with other people in your life.
Sri Lanka, like many countries in Asia, has a pluralistic society. As a psychologist, as a person who has dealt with many this aspect of problems in war-torn areas, do you have any suggestion on how to maintain the pluralistic elements of a society?
I mean, I agree that the problem of how to sustain pluralism and strengthen it is a challenge that faces many of our countries in Asia, and Sri Lanka is no exception. I think we haven't been particularly good always at finding ways of celebrating the diversity that we have, and in many ways have reduced that diversity over the years into sort of crude categories of ethnicity and so on, whereas in many ways we had an even greater richness, let's say 30 or 40 or 100 years ago, where people had a very strong sense of self rooted in, say, a village identity or a trade identity. Of course, there were negative aspects of this as well, where in relation to caste discrimination and so on, we had in Sri Lanka. But I think in my experience with working with people affected by conflict that has served to divide many people in this country, I see great potential in personal acts of, let's say, working across boundaries. One of the things that have been most moving to me is to see very often women who've lost children to various different armed actors, sometimes on opposite sides of a conflict, come together and share in each other's loss without labeling the other person as, somehow on another side, or somehow different from them. And through those types of smaller interactions at a very personal level, I think there are shifts in the way in which people perceive one another. And the real challenge is, how do you take those intimate steps of relating and multiply or amplify these to an entire nation. And that I think is the big challenge. We're certainly nowhere near answering that challenge right now, but I think that in some ways we do have to take inspiration from people who have perhaps lost the most, but are still able to empathize, to reach out to those who conventionally might be seen as different, as the other, but to reach out to them in some sort of human fashion.
Well, on that note, Anand, thank you for that very information presentation, formative, and I would like to wish you luck.
Thank you very much. I think we'll need it.